our guest now is Mary Holm in the studio. Welcome, Mary.
Thanks very much, Susanna.
We're going to talk about money, so please text in your questions. Today, of course, we've got a focus specifically on KiwiSaver funds. And Mary, if you want to pick it up, we're going to be talking about higher risk.
Basically about the higher risk KiwiSaver funds. Before we start on that, though, much more interesting was hearing Elvis singing a Beatles song. I didn't know he ever sang any Beatles songs.
Nor did I.
So that was quite phenomenal.
But it sort of makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And of course, everyone in the control room have got nice big smiles on their faces because their cleverness has been found out. But wasn't that fun?
Yeah, it was good.
It's nice to just thank you, Mary.
Elvis had kind of died out by the time the Beatles were big, but obviously there was still an overlap going on. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so higher risk KiwiSaver funds, they're terribly interesting too, of course, aren't they?
Absolutely. So if you have a question about higher risk KiwiSaver funds or just a question in general, we can go with the general questions as well. Text in 2101. I will have my eyes peeled on our text machine and share those questions with you all and with, of course, you, Mary, for an answer if you've got it.
That'd be, yes.
But let's get straight to it. What is it that you've been noticing with the higher risk KiwiSaver fund and our behaviour?
Yeah, what prompted me to look at this right now was that Westpac has done a bit of number crunching on what happened to their KiwiSaver scheme when the share market crashed at the time of COVID, and it was sort of late February and through March in 2020 when the share markets in New Zealand and around the world just tumbled and people's KiwiSaver balances dropped a lot. And it was really the first big downturn like that since the global financial crisis. And the global financial crisis, which was around 2007, 8, 9, KiwiSaver was just starting then, and a lot of people weren't even in it yet, and those who were weren't that sure what was going on. And then since then, there weren't that many big drops in the share market until 2020. And so people suddenly were saying, oh my God, my balance has gone down to, by a quarter or whatever. And panicking. And I also write a Q&A column in the Weekend Herald, and I got lots and lots of letters from people, some of them saying I'm thinking of reducing the risk of my fund, and others saying I already have. And I was furiously writing and saying, don't, everybody please don't. And it was too late for some, of course. But because it's a terrible thing to do. If you move out of a higher risk fund when the share market's down, you're going to get less money than if you move out of it when the share market's up. When I say higher risk funds, I'm talking about funds that largely invest in shares. Most of them, they're called growth funds or aggressive funds, aggressive funds tend to be all shares or nearly all shares. Growth funds are mainly shares, and shares are, along with property, the most volatile of the sort of mainstream investments. There are some KiwiSaver funds who invest in property, not nearly as many. It's commercial property. It's nearly always, it'll be factories, shopping centres, the office buildings, that sort of investment.
Yeah.
There are a few of them who invest only in property, but most are in shares. So we had this big crash in March 2020, and then a remarkably quick recovery. The markets within 3 or 4 months were back to where they'd been, which is unusual. Usually they stay down for a bit longer and crawl back up again. But one of the main points I want to make today is that could happen. It could happen today. There's no really easy way to predict when the share market's going to suddenly plunge. And what happens is once it starts to fall, then people panic and start selling, and that makes it fall more. And so there's a sort of psychological element in the whole thing. And So to say to people, look, it will happen. It's not that it might, it will. And if you're in a higher risk KiwiSaver fund, please just stay put. Don't move your money when the market's gone down. When I say it will happen, it might happen today. It might be 10 years before it happens again. But what you've got to do is picture the balance in your KiwiSaver fund. Let's say you've got 30,000 in there. Picture it going down to 15. Picture it halving. Occasionally, you'll get a drop that's that big where the market will halve. And what you've got to do is picture that and then say, I'm going to stay there. I'm not going to move. Because otherwise, if you move, in Westpac, let me get on to what they had about 18,000 people in their KiwiSaver who wanted to move to a lower risk, or did move to a lower risk fund during the COVID crash, which is not that many, but it's worrying that quite a few people did that. A lot of them, about a third, moved back again within 3 months, but that's still not very good, because what happened is they sold when the units in the fund were cheap, and then bought again later when the price had gone back up again. So you picture if you sold a car when things were cheap, or a property maybe is an easier one. You sold a house when prices were down, as they are currently, and then buy back again a few months later when prices have gone back up. That's not good. You've lost in the process of doing that. And so with the Westpac people, they had about a third of them moved back within 3 months, and then quite a few others moved back gradually later on when they realised the markets were coming back up. Too late, but better than never. But about a quarter never moved back, stayed in lower risk after that. And what Westpac did, they calculated a customer on a median wage putting 3% into KiwiSaver, 25,000 in KiwiSaver, what would have happened if they moved from a higher risk fund to a lower risk fund at the very wrong time, just when the markets had plunged, and they would have ended up with, by now, $51,000, whereas otherwise they would have ended up with $61,000 if they'd stayed in the higher risk fund. And when they extrapolate that over longer periods, like over 30 years, you're going to go into retirement with perhaps nearly $250,000 less if you move from high risk to low risk. It's hugely significant, yes. And so there are some people, when that crash happened in 2020, I suppose they realised they couldn't cope with the big downturn, and if at that point you realise you can't cope and you move to lower risk because you can't cope, then just stay there. That means you're a person who can't stomach seeing the markets fall, and so you're far better. It's a pity you weren't just staying in the lower risk in the first place, but you realise you can't cope, so get into lower risk, medium to low risk, and stay there. But I really encourage people to be brave and go into the higher risk, because you'll get higher returns over the long period, and it'll make a big difference to how much you've got in retirement. So, yeah.
A couple of things come to mind.
Yes, yeah.
If you were one of these people who went into the low risk and you've stayed there ever since,
yes,
do you just suck it up and go back to the high risk now?
No.
When would you move? Just stay where you are?
If you're the sort of person that couldn't cope with that downturn, then you can't. Then do not go back to higher risk, because you're just going to do it again. And every time you do it, you're losing money. But there are two reasons to move from high risk to low risk. One is that you just can't cope, and you're lying awake at night worrying and all of that. And if that's you, just stay in lower risk. Don't start mucking around and trying to... People who try to guess. They think, oh, the market's doing better, I'm going to move to high risk now. There's lots and lots of research to show they end up worse off. They're trying to time when to move in and out, and it just doesn't work. Even the experts get it wrong. You can't know what the market's going to do tomorrow or even this afternoon. So, and the other reason to move to low risk is if you're going to be spending the money within about 10 years. So it might be on a first home or it might be in retirement. Noting, though, that people in their 50s and 60s, okay, once they get to 65, they can take the money out, but they might not take the money out. So it doesn't mean that when you're, late 50s, early 60s, you should automatically move to a lower risk KiwiSaver fund. Think about when you're likely to spend that money. And there's quite a lot of people who've got other savings, or they're planning to continue to work. And many, many New Zealanders now, I think I heard the other day, between 65 and 70, about half the people in that age group are now continuing to work, at least part-time. So for those people or people with other savings to cover their expenses early in retirement, they might say, I'm not going to spend my KiwiSaver till I'm 70, 75. So there's no need to move the money to lower risk until you get within roughly sort of 10 years of when you think you're going to spend it, and then you want to gradually reduce your risk level so that you don't find yourself taking the money out after a crash. You don't want that to happen. Yeah.
So if we could focus a little bit, if you are a person who's in that 10-year mark or a little bit under,
yes,
when you talk about gradually moving your money from the higher managed risk to the lower, what does that look like? How would you do that? How would you advise?
Would move to a medium risk one for a while, and they're balanced funds typically are the sort of medium risk ones. And you might even want to, if you've got a fair bit in KiwiSaver, you might want to make that move gradually. Move, say, a third of your money down to the medium risk, and then a month or so later move another third, and a month after that move another third down. Because, why muck around with that? Well, you might end up moving the whole lot at a time that doesn't end up being very good timing. You can't tell on the day. It's sort of later on when you look back and you say, oh, damn, I moved the whole lot at just the wrong time, just when the markets are going to grow fast. Yeah.
So it is about taking time. We've got so many questions now. Let's jump into them. Yeah. Thank you, listeners. Hi, Susanna and Mary. What is your opinion on high growth funds as opposed to growth? This is for a small investment amount, not my whole KiwiSaver, which is in growth.
Yeah, so they're talking about a high growth fund, which would be sometimes called an aggressive fund. So that's one that would be probably nearly all in shares. And that's just that much riskier, that much more volatile. It's not really risky so much as volatile, but on average you're going to get higher returns. So I would say to that person, yes, do it, as long as it's money that you don't plan to spend within 10 years. But be calm when the markets go down, because that one will go down even more than your growth fund. Your high growth fund will go down even more, almost certainly. Yeah, but it will also grow more in the good times.
Be calm is the key.
Yes.
David's been in touch.
Yeah.
If I'm still working, should I put my super in KiwiSaver if I'm getting super?
Yes. Now, so he's presumably at 65 or over, and he's still working, and he's saying, so he's getting New Zealand super coming in, and he doesn't need it at the moment for his groceries because he's earning a wage, I suppose. No reason not to put it in that or any other money you've got into KiwiSaver once you're 65, because you can take it out whenever you want to. Yeah, I should just preface that by saying the first time you take money out after you're 65, it might take a week or so, and you've got to, file a few documents with the provider. It's a little bit of hassle the first time you withdraw, but after that it should be easy to do. Yeah.
So just allow for that time, and again, stay calm.
Yes, yes.
Another listener's been in touch. Hi, I have 90,000 in KiwiSaver, 90,000 in savings, and want a home of my own. 55 and flatting isn't great. My taxable income is 50,000. I have debt.
Yeah, now, the person's got debt, so I'm assuming that they don't own a home yet, so it's not a mortgage. Unless it's the student loan, then it's probably, that person's probably paying quite high interest on that debt. I would make that the number one priority. Use your savings to get rid of that debt, because if you're paying high interest on the debt, you're going backwards. Your savings won't be earning as much as the interest you're paying on the debt. That would be first thing to do, get rid of that debt. But then, yes, hopefully that person can get themselves into a house. Yeah.
They feel close.
Yeah.
Let's have a look here. What are the benefits of paying for a well-managed high-risk KiwiSaver? Understand fees are bad, but thought I'd give managed a go with a well-performing scheme. Need to know negatives too, just don't want to hear them.
Yeah.
There's a cute little emoji that goes with that.
Yes, yeah. Now, so managed fund, I assume they mean by that a sort of actively managed fund, and KiwiSaver and other funds are basically either actively managed or they're index funds. So they're simply investing in a share market index, which is a lot cheaper to run. And the research over the years tends to show that the index funds do better. So that's where my money's in, the low-fee index funds, and it has been since the 1970s, and I've never looked back on it. So I would say, even though that person is looking at an actively managed fund that has done well, the point is they don't necessarily continue to do well, even if they've got 10 or 20 years of history. There's, once again, a lot of research looks at what's done well in one decade, and quite often it doesn't do well in the next decade. So, that person might come back to me in a few years and say, I wish I'd gone with them. But I think the chances are higher that they'd come back saying, I'm glad I didn't, and went instead into a low-fee fund, low-fee KiwiSaver. Yeah.
I just want to come back to our person with the 90,000 in the KiwiSaver, the 90,000 in savings, wanting to own their own home. They actually have no debt. It was just divided across two texts. Thank you, team in the studio. I was
great.
not sure what they were referring to.
So they've got no debt. Okay, so they've got 90,000 in each. If they're planning to spend on a first home fairly soon, they should move their KiwiSaver money to low-risk KiwiSaver for the same reasons we were talking about before. You don't want to be taking the money out right when the market's plunged. You might be putting an offer in on a house and your offer's been accepted, and then you go to get your money out of KiwiSaver and it's not worth as much. But yes, so they've got 180,000. Their first step should probably be to go and talk to a mortgage advisor. And they're free to the public, and ask that person, how much of a mortgage they'd be able to raise given their whole situation, and then they can get a feel for the sort of property they might be able to get. It probably won't be anything terribly grand with a total of 180,000 savings, but they can probably get something. Yeah.
Very good. Now, we have talked about age, but this,
yes,
for the purposes of this listener too, is there a cut-off point, age-wise, to stay clear of high risk?
No. If you're 95, maybe, because you probably don't have 5 years 10 years in hand before you're going to spend the money, although a few people do. But so as you get older, you want to keep that sort of 10-year horizon in mind. But certainly at 70, you could easily be planning to spend some of your savings in your 80s, and at 75, planning to spend it when you're 85. Yeah.
Nice. Now, Rook has been in touch. Please ask Mary, if someone is permanently migrating from New Zealand, are they able to withdraw all their funds from KiwiSaver, or is it locked up till they're 65? What happens if they decide to return to New Zealand after a few years if life overseas didn't work out as planned?
No, I think it's been a long time since I looked at this. If you're moving to Australia, the rules are different. Then you can't take the money out, I'm pretty sure. If you're moving somewhere else, you can take it out, I think, all but $1,000. I think you have to leave $1,000 in there, which is actually the same rule as if you're using KiwiSaver to buy a first home, you have to leave $1,000 in there. But I just can't remember the details. If they Google it, the Inland Revenue website's got some good, clear information about it, yes.
Lovely. These are similar questions in terms of not being related to high-risk KiwiSaver funds. One person, Tony, is asking, can I use my high-risk KiwiSaver fund as security on a bank loan?
No reason not to, I would have thought. Although the bank will be taking notice of that person's age and be aware that they can't get at that KiwiSaver money until they're 65 in normal circumstances. But especially if they were sort of 55 or older, I would think the bank would consider that as part of the security on the loan. But, yeah, I'm not an expert on that, really.
Another question.
Yeah.
If investing in a managed share fund, do you recommend one with international US shares, given the US market has grown so much recently?
Yeah, now, the American market, I think now it makes up more than all the total shares in the American market are more than half the shares in the world. It's very dominant. But I highly recommend putting your money in a global fund, a world fund, that's not just America. It just gets you this lovely broad diversification so that when some countries' share markets plunge, because there are other big countries in, Germany, Britain, Japan, etc. And so when the American market goes down, one of these others might not. My personal long-term money is in global share funds. Yeah.
That's probably us for the topic today, because I'm looking at the clock.
Yes.
If you wanted to add anything more, Mary, though.
Not really. Perhaps just to mention, seeing I've been talking about Westpac's research, that they were sort of issuing that at the point of announcing that they've now opened a high growth fund, like an aggressive fund. And my reaction to that was, well, good, but it's about time. I mean, most of the other banks have now done that. And there's a whole lot of banks aren't necessarily the best in KiwiSaver. They're all right. They're okay, but they're not. They don't tend to be brilliant. I'd say go for possibly some of the smaller providers. Go for the low fees.
Low fees.
My recommendation. Yes.
And before you go, Mary,
yes,
some more details on Elvis singing Beatles.
Yes.
Thank you, producer Carol. Thank you. Elvis not only sang the Beatles' Something, but also Yesterday, Get Back, Lady Madonna, and Hey Jude.
My goodness, I'm going to go listen to that because I love the Beatles, but Elvis has got this wonderful voice, and so it'd be neat to hear him singing those songs.
I really love that you have revealed that you're an Elvis fan, Mary Holm.
Are you, Susanna?
I am.
Brilliant.
I am. I have to say I am particularly enamoured with the costumes, but there we go. A conversation for another day. The voice, phenomenal. Magical. Yes. Absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, Susanna.
Mary Holm.